Listen very carefully and follow my instructions. Prepare your brain for the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast.
I mean, look, being an entrepreneur, I would not go through the rest of my life without taking nootropics. Aniracetam, piracetam, oxiracetam, uridine monophosphate, CDP-choline, modafinil, Noopept, forget it. You can always have a better brain.
The Cortex Nootropics podcast is about to begin.
Welcome to episode number 24 of the Cortex Nootropics podcast. I am your host, Ryan Michael Ballo. Check it out. Somebody asked a question recently, and this will be the basis of the topic for the podcast. Look, I take aniracetam one day at 700 milligrams, and it rocks my world, and it's great. But then another, the next day or 2 days later or the next week, I have to take 1500 to get the same result. But then it's not a tolerance thing because 2-3 days later, I'm back down to only needing 700. Is this normal? And so basically the gist of the question and the gist of the podcast is, is there any truth to this idea of a nootropic sweet spot for your particular stack? How long does it last? Can you keep it there? And how else can you optimize it? And the answer to that question is yes. It's not the sweet spot is not mythological. Okay, it's not a myth that you could find a nootropic sweet spot. Right? It might be fleeting to some extent over time, either because of receptor downregulation, basically tolerance. Like caffeine, you might need more caffeine over time. And some nootropics are the opposite, like uridine. You take uridine and a good bioavailable choline source together. First of all, it's one of the most powerful combinations in nootropics. It's the basis for the Cortex stack, our primary stack. But uridine works on phosphatidylcholine, and it works on improving neurite outgrowth. CDP-choline works on dopamine receptors. Both combined work on acetylcholine and dopamine receptors. They modulate them positively over time. So over time, I found I need a lot less uridine than I used to. Right? Uridine is neurogenic. It repairs. It works with B vitamins and DHA, stuff you have in your body, stuff you can get in your diet, on repairing the brain. Right? Literally engaging the process of neurogenesis and cellular repair. It does that in conjunction with B9 specifically. Folic acid, uridine, a choline source, some DHA, forget it. I mean, you've turned on, you have the raw ingredients right there for neurogenesis. So you need less of some of those compounds over time. So the sweet spot is I don't want to say fleeting, but over the course of 6 months or so, it can absolutely change. But within the small time frame, which is, I guess, kind of a relatively large time frame of 6 months, you can keep your sweet spot. You can actually have a sweet spot, of most nootropic compounds and keep it relatively the same. We're going to talk about how the basic gist of it is keeping everything else in your brain and body the same and not doing many deviations. We'll explain that in a second. But 4 preliminary things we've got to get out of the way, which are critically important. Number one, we are doing a lot of nootropic stack consulting. That's where we you spend 40 minutes with me. You get 40 minutes with me on a call or a video chat or an audio call, and I could basically help you to get your stack perfect. So many people hit me up and they go, look, I'm taking this, I'm taking aniracetam, I got my choline source in there, but there's something missing. And we do the consult with them, and we find out that they've got ashwagandha in there and it doesn't stack well, or they've got it in there in a quantity that just doesn't stack well. We take the ashwagandha down, take the racetam up just a little bit. The internet tells them to take 500 milligrams of CDP choline, which is way too much for most people, for lots of people, right? So we take that down a couple hundred milligrams, and boom, they're in the best place of their life, and it's sustainable, and it's like this crazy shift of like, I'm getting nootropics to work semi for me, and I'm getting good brain performance, but it's spotty and it's iffy and there's something off, to like, wow, full blown, I've got the limitless stack. That's what we like doing. That's a consult package we offer. Get it at livecortex.com. It is $65. Get you 40 minutes with me, where we can actually refine your stack, because it really takes years of distinctions, I found, to be able to really refine a stack to the point where it works perfect, and there's nothing messing the rest of the stack up. So that's one thing Two other things. We wrote 2 Nootropics digital guides. You can download them right now for any device you have, Kindle, iPad, iPhone, Android. One of them is called Smarter, Better, Faster. That is a all-around nootropics instructional protocol. Tells you everything you need to know about using nootropics surgically, plus has a bunch of stacks. Smarter, Better, Faster. Also wrote a guide strictly on racetams. If racetams is your nootropic of choice, we wrote an entire guide on that. That's based on 8.5 years of my experience taking racetams, all the major 8 nootropic racetams. We've got sublingual stacks, and then we also have oral stacks, bunch of oral stacks, bunch of sublingual stacks, 80 plus racetam stacks, refined, proven effective racetam stacks. That's called the Racetam God Guide. Get those at livecortex.com. And then we've got Cortex R Stack, which combines uridine, CDP, choline, and artichoke extract for a very synergistic nootropic experience. It's being compared to modafinil by most of our customers. It's being called the only pre-made stack that works. Get all that stuff at livecortex.com. But I also wanted to mention, for those of you that know about those products and are waiting to pull the trigger, and are thinking about getting both of them, we put a combination together where you can save $8 or so on the whole thing. Get it at livecortex.com. That should be in the menu somewhere where it says Nootropics Combos, where you can get basically the Smarter, Better, Faster book and the Racetam God Guide together as a combo. Okay, so let's get into the sweet spot. So the notion of the nootropic sweet spot is that, one can take a particular nootropic compound, or a nootropic stack. They can take a stack of a bunch of different compounds, or maybe even it's one compound, and they can take that, a very particular dose of that nootropic and have that consistently affect them the same way, right? Your sweet spot, my sweet spot on modafinil is 70 milligrams. My sweet spot on CDP choline is 75 milligrams. My sweet spot on uridine is 150 milligrams, right? Uridine changes over time because it works on a bunch of cool things in the brain over time that seem to make you require less of it. But the sweet spot is a real thing and does exist for a lot of people. The primary question that set off the basis of this podcast was, why is it that I can take 700 milligrams of aniracetam one day and it's totally awesome, and then another day it isn't, and I need more of it, and then another day I'm back to 700 milligrams and all is well. And the answer really has to do with the state of your baseline at the time. Okay, that is the basic gist of it. The state of your baseline at the time. So a good example would be if your baseline. Let me just start off by making the statement: if your baseline is uniformly the same, as much as possible, basically at the 95% of the time, right? Like, say you're just bulletproof and you're just like, I want to keep my baseline perfect, and I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to sleep right. I'm going to eat, maybe a variety of foods, but all in the same kind of quantity, so I don't get too full. I don't have digestive issues. I'm detoxifying and eliminating waste in a very particular manner. I'm drinking a lot of water. I'm doing cardio every day, right? You've got all of your stuff that puts your body and brain in a very particular place very consistently. Then at that point, you're more than you're more likely to respond to a particular dose set of particular compounds, particular nootropic compounds, than not. And that dose set will stay around that dose. It'll stay positively affecting you at that dose for as long as you keep your baseline the same. The idea is look, if everything in your body is relatively the same, then you will respond to the nootropic in a particular dose relatively the same most of the time. It's once people start deviating somehow, right? It's once deviations take place in their body, they start taking some medication, and they go out and drink alcohol, something else happens. They're not strict with their diet, that the sweet spot changes. And then you get confused and go, well, now I need 1,500 milligrams of oxyracetam. What the heck is this? I used to take 1,000. I'd be good. What's going on? What changed? What changed is your diet. What changed is you didn't. Folks don't. I don't blame anyone for this, because America, especially, is notoriously bad for stuff like this. But folks don't recognize. People go, oh, just live a little. Oh, live a little. What's that mean? Feel like crap a little, just so that you can you sacrifice feeling good so that you can have some beers or something, or enjoy or eat some food that's going to make your stomach hurt later. I'm fully past that. I do not do that. I stick to a very, very particular diet, and if I go on the deep end ever, it's very, very minimal. Like, it'll be, instead of eating salmon and like vegetables and rice, and some good quality sauerkraut and some water, at my house, it'll be salmon and potatoes and vegetables and a glass of red wine at a restaurant that I know uses like minimally processed stuff and doesn't load their salmon with like a bunch of weird vegetable oil or something like that, right? It's like, in America, I think there's this weird thing. I mean, I can only speak for America. There's this weird thing where like people are like, it makes you more cool if you can be gluttonous. If you can be like, yeah, I can eat 100 wings and like only halfway throw up. It's like, that's not cool, man. And dude, yes, you do have to be extremely, thoroughly consistent with your diet, with your exercise routine. You got to be disciplined, regimented. And those are all the key words: disciplined, strict, and regimented with your diet in order to keep the same sort of baseline, physiological and therefore brain function, in order to, number one, feel good, but then in order to respond pretty similarly, pretty consistently to a particular ingredient quantity of a particular nootropic or a particular nootropic stack. Let me give you some examples. Alcohol and GABA and the amino acid and nootropic L-theanine is a great example here. All right, so alcohol, one of the things that alcohol does is alcohol binds to GABA receptors, modulates GABA receptors, and when you stop drinking it, like if you go out for a night and you're drinking it, part of the hangover, the other part of the hangover is your liver's having to deal with a bunch of toxins. It's clearing it out. There's toxic byproducts from the alcohol that are, being absorbed into your bloodstream. You're having to eliminate them. If you don't eliminate fast enough, they're sitting in your small and large bowel, and that's potentially getting back in your blood. If you've got leaky gut, it's getting in your blood, right? All these toxins just sort of sit around in your blood, and they end up in your joints and in your brain, and you feel bad as a result. Plus, you're depleting B vitamins. You might be dehydrated. There's all a number of things happening. A lot of it has to do with toxicity and clearance, waste elimination. But one of the things that happens is you're in GABA withdrawal for a while after drinking alcohol, like especially a lot of alcohol, 5+ drinks, 3 to 5, you're in a little bit of a GABA withdrawal. So your propensity to respond well, your need for L-theanine, the amino acid that increases brain GABA, is going to be more after you've drank alcohol than when you didn't. Specifically in the dose quantity. So, like this is the case for me. I don't really require. These days I used to have. I don't want to call it an anxiety issue, but borderline. I figured out how to optimize it and fix it, and I don't have it anymore. If I'm very regimented on what I do. But there basically, even still, is the case where if I were to drink alcohol, any more than basically 2 drinks of something, then I go into sort of a mild GABA, seemingly, a mild seeming GABA withdrawal, where I need more theanine to tone it down, and I actually start to feel a little anxious. If I got a little anxiety going on from the alcohol. For those of you that are drinking, they drink alcohol and wonder why it gives you anxiety, this is it, man. It's binding to GABA receptors, it's modifying GABA in some way, it's depleting GABA, in some way, and putting you in a place where you need more GABA, where your GABA receptors, need more GABA. So my demand, in this hypothetical, someone's demand for L-theanine, which will increase brain GABA under the condition of having just drank alcohol, which, basically starts to get your brain in a GABA withdrawal, is more, right? You get it? Whereas, like, if I did not drink alcohol, and in this hypothetical, this person did not drink alcohol, and they stayed at their baseline, their need for L-theanine would stay exactly the same, or relatively close to where it normally is. Okay, so the variations in sweet spots within small time ranges, like 6 months, on nootropic compounds, really any chemicals that go into the brain and modify brain function, in a lot of cases, if we're not talking about downregulation, if we're not talking about upregulation, have to do with variations in your baseline, okay? Get it? Variations in the necessity for the ingredient quantity of the particular compound or compounds, right, is commensurate with the variations of your regimen in eating, in sleeping, in exercising, in doing everything else right to keep your body straight. Okay, so let me give you some other examples of, examples that I've come to run into over time. And I mean, look, why not have them have to do with alcohol? I don't really drink much anymore. If I do, I mean, I want to live to 100 plus. I'm obsessively into centenarians, folks who live to 100 or more. And studying them, I mean, there's many things that they do all uniformly. They all do the same. But one of them is that they drink red wine. They don't drink a whole lot of red wine. They drink, a glass or 2 or 3 a day. But they drink red wine. And perhaps it's because it relaxes them. Perhaps it's because of the antioxidant capacity. Perhaps it's resveratrol. Perhaps it's a combination of all those things. Perhaps it's some other thing that no one knows about. But it is a very particular type of red wine. That some of these folks in what are called the blue zones, which are zones in which people live to 100 or more, are drinking wine. So, these days, the extent to which, because I'm so interested in living to 100, I'll drink alcohol is a glass of good quality red wine. That's it. And I don't even like to do it because then I've got to detox it out of my system, and it makes me feel less than optimal. That's how alcohol is. But in cases like, I didn't learn my lesson on alcohol fully to where I am now, to where I just won't touch the stuff, unless it's very low quantity and unless it's good quality red wine. Where I used to drink 3 to 5 glasses of wine if I went out, or I would drink 3 to 5 or 6 beers, God forbid beers, with all the terrible gluten in it. And I'm not one of those sensitive guys. I'm just, I recognize gluten is hard on some people's guts for various reasons. People get bloated. It's no wonder why. There's all this stuff in it. Wheat doesn't do too well with a lot of folks. Folks don't do well with high quantity gluten. And look, I mean, it would change the way that I responded to nootropics the next day. There was a period where I was so heavily, I mean, these days I cycle off of compounds. I cycle between stuff. I'm like, all right, go cholinergic for a couple weeks. Okay, now it's time to switch, because you might run into side effects or something. Now I need to optimize the dopaminergic system. Okay, now I need to optimize the nose system. I need to optimize the rest system. But when I was basically taking nootropics without cycling, there would be these times where I would go out and have some alcohol, I'd drink 3 to 5 drinks, and then I would just respond very poorly the next day to the nootropics. So perfect example of exactly what we're talking about. My sweet spot on the Cortex stack, as an example, changed. No longer did 2 capsules do it for me after consuming alcohol, and particularly high quantity the next day. And it took 2 hours to onset the way it was supposed to. Same thing with Nupep, same thing with alpha GPC as a standalone, same thing with racetams. I wouldn't really take modafinil in proximity with alcohol, but same thing with a lot of other compounds. And that's because the alcohol was messing up with my neurotransmitters. In the particular case of cholinergics or racetams and alcohol, I'm not really sure what the mechanisms were there, or what was going on. But I can tell you that when the liver's having a hard time detoxing, or when you're trying to detox a lot of alcohol out of your liver, clear it from your small and then large bowels, and somehow some of it ends up in your brain, you're not going to function good. Your brain's not going to function well, and you're going to respond differently to nootropics. Okay, so that's one good solid example. Another good example was in 2015. Just to give you some real solid examples that really solidify the point. 2015, I got hit with mono, the Epstein-Barr virus. I was in the United States military when I would have been in college. I didn't go to college. I dropped out of school in 10th grade. School's just not for me. I recognized I wanted to be an entrepreneur relatively early on. That's the path for me going, and I need to do. I don't need to learn. I need to do. That's how I learn things. And so I didn't go to college. And I didn't spend any time in the university environment where people normally get mono. That's where people get it. They get it in college. So I never got it. So I got it, I got the Epstein-Barr virus, which is the virus that causes mono. Most of us are walking around with it. It's just dormant in our immune systems. 95% of us are exposed to it. Most of us take hold of it and get control of it. But I got it at 31. I was older. And it really messed with me. Tried to hide in my liver, disrupted my thyroid functionality, disrupted detoxification systems. And at that point, I'm healed from it now, and I've got it under control. I learned how to kick its butt and get it dormant and target the systems that it messed up, because the Epstein-Barr virus is, the rabbit hole goes so deep, and it is responsible for a lot of problems. And even when it goes sort of dormant, it just leaves your body in a wreck if you're older, especially, and if you don't understand, basically you need to eliminate toxins, because it messes with your liver's capacity. And so you probably stored a bunch of toxins in your joints, And your lymphatic system might have gotten clogged up, any number of different things. But anyway, during that time period, I could, no amount of nootropics worked the way that they normally would work for me. I had to fix all the detoxification systems, and then nootropics were like, stellar again. Modafinil was stellar again. Everything was stellar again. But I couldn't when my brain was like having to respond to like a toxic overload from an impaired liver from getting the Epstein-Barr virus and mono when I was older, right? So that's just another good example. And on the general notion of toxins, man, people get on like Dave Asprey's case, the guy from Bulletproof, and they're like, dude, there's no toxins in coffee. Like, there is, toxins in lots of coffee, and some people do respond to them a lot worse than others. People talk about being the canary in the coal mine. Yeah, that's because they're not detoxing properly. And so when folks detox pathways, there's like literal detox pathways in the liver, go awry and things go wrong in their body. And then major detoxification systems, which people always try to use as an excuse to say, you don't need to go on a cleanse, your body detoxes. Yeah, well, those systems, that's true, but those systems can go awry. When that happens, yeah, people do become canaries in the, in the coal mine. It happened to me when I had Epstein-Barr virus, and it was really wrecking my detoxification system. It happens to many people that I know. This is a real thing. So on the topic of toxins, if you've got just impaired digestion and you're not moving waste out like very, very efficiently, a couple bowel movements a day, at least one, nice solid bowel movements, and like your intestines are, if your intestines aren't clean and functioning good and correctly, then yeah, you're more than likely dealing with a more than regular toxin load. And that toxin load is fussing with your brain function. And so the degree to which you're going to respond to a particular nootropic compound or stack is different depending on your toxin load. And if you want to read about, if you think I'm talking pseudoscience or something, go read it, go read this study. I think it was in the I want to say the 80s or 90s, where fat samples from a bunch of humans were tested. And in all of them, it was like a large percentage of them, something like 80+% of these people's fat samples, there were high quantities of very particular toxins in their fat, stored in their fat. Right, so people are walking around with this stuff, and it's in their joints, it's in their brain, it's in the body tries to sort of distribute toxins wherever it can, other than having them be central and sort of hang out in organs and things of this nature. And so, if your toxin load is high, if your brain is getting hit with this stuff, yeah, you're going to respond totally differently, and thus your sweet spot's going to be different for nootropics. So, summing it up, the sweet spot can be relatively the same. It doesn't have to be fleeting or so variable, but the way to keep it very, very consistent is to keep everything else in your body very, very consistent. The way you do that is you eat a very regimented diet. Look, get with it, man. Don't think it's like limiting your freedom. It's great to feel great. Right? And know what you're going to eat and know how it's going to affect you. I love it. I would never go back to randomly eating whatever. I know how I feel now, and I feel like a god king. Because I know what I put in my body and know what it's going to do to me, and I think that's really the way. So you got to be regimented with your body. Got to be regimented with what you eat, how you sleep, how much alcohol you drink. You got to be very acutely aware of how your liver is working and detoxing. If you're hungover for more than 2 days, there's a problem. There's a problem there with detox. It's whether it's your liver or it's dumping the stuff through your kidney, or it's sitting around in your small and large intestine, because that's not your gut motility slow and stuff is sitting in your guts. You've got gut dysbiosis, bacterial issues in your small intestine. God forbid you have something like SIBO, or you've got some sort of dysbiosis in the large bowel, or you have freaking candida. I can't tell how many people I talk to have fungal overgrowths, and it's wrecking their life. That stuff is just going to change the way that you respond to nootropics. But if you are relatively the same with everything, and you're super regimented, and you know how your body works, and you know whatever food things or whatever exercise routine is going to affect you, and you stick to it, and you stay relatively the same, and your baseline stays the same, then your sweet spot on your stack is going to stay relatively the same for as long as it can within the confines of before you start to engage in receptor downregulation and or receptor upregulation, depending on the compound. And that's for a whole nother podcast. Google around neurotransmitter receptor downregulation as it relates to nootropics. We've talked about it on the livecortex.com/blog content base. Perhaps we'll do a whole podcast about it, but we've written about it on livecortex.com. So search on Google and see if you can find it. But yes, the sweet spot is not mythological. It's something that you can keep relatively the same for a pretty long period of time. And the best way to consistently take 700 milligrams of oxiracetam and a choline source, in a very particular quantity, and have it predictably affect you the same way, is to have your body's baseline basically the same every time you take it. Okay, and again, I want to end on this. People in America they think it's cool to be a cowboy, like just uncalculated cowboys. That's what Americans are, and that's not a good thing, guys. It's not a good thing. They think it's cool to be gluttonous. It's cool to go, hey, I can eat 8 pancakes and I'll be all right. You don't want to do that, man. I can do anything. You don't want to be able to do anything. And it's not cool to like be able to just go do anything. It's not cool to go and just like throw a bunch of things down your esophagus and into your guts and seep into your body that you don't want there. You want to keep it very consistent. You want to keep it regimented, because you know what? At the end of the day, the real question is, how good do you want to feel? How good do you want to feel? The better you feel, the more consistent you are, the more consistent your stack is going to affect you. That has been the podcast, episode number 22, on keeping the sweet spot of nootropics consistent. Check us out on the web at livecortex.com. Check out our nootropic products. You got the Racetam God Guide, 80 plus Racetam stacks. Racetam God Guide, get that at livecortex.com. It's $24.99. Be the best $24.99 you've ever spent, or you've spent in a while. I don't want to make crazy claims because it's highly packed with information, good information. And then we got Smarter, Better, Faster, Total Nootropics Instructional Protocol with stacks as well. We've also got the Cortex stack, and we've got Stack Consulting, where you get 40 minutes with me, 15 additional email correspondences. I will help your stack get perfect. Get that at livecortex.com. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.